Hi everyone, in this video we will be taking a look at how you can Dockerize Next.js applications. So let's get started. Let's go to a quick overview of Next.js and Docker. So first up, what is Next.js? Next.js is a framework which is built around React.js. Once again, React.js is not a framework but it is a UI library. Next.js comes with many features out of the box and it's built with production in mind. And that's one of the reasons it has gained such a wide adoption by top tier companies. Some of them you can see it on the screen here. So if you want to find out more about Next.js, then you can visit nextjs.org. So let's take a look at why Next.js is so amazing. One of the reasons that I love Next.js is because there's zero config, which means automatic compilation and bundling. So it's already optimized for production right from the start, and there's very little effort as a developer. So there's also something called API routes, which allows you to create API endpoints to provide backend functionality. And it is also unique because it also provides something called file system routing, which means every component that you see in the pages directory actually becomes a route. And this is really unique because you don't need to really specify the route for each component level, but rather the file directory, the way you structure your application actually maps to the route itself, which is pretty cool. And of course, there are some advanced features like SSG and SSR, so I would really suggest that you go through the documentation to find out more about that. So next, let's talk about Docker and why Docker is so good. So firstly, let's talk about why do we actually need Docker. Docker was created because deploying your services was just too hard. Like there was often so much mismatches in the library, the tool versioning, there are missing configs, the files are missing. So there's always some kind of complexity which was associated with packaging your app. And this is how Docker solves it. It really solves it by bundling and packaging your files together for you. So if I'm actually building a Node.js application, for example, so I need the Node.js runtime, I need a database which is Mongo, and there's my app, of course, and there's associated configs. So all of these individual things which actually come together and helps to make your app run, they can all be packaged together nicely, including the specific versions that you need, and then that can be actually shared. So bundling this process is called actually creating a Docker image, and we can even host this image on something like Docker Hub. So think about it as like something like GitHub, which is for repos, but here Docker Hub is for Docker images, and then we can run this image on something called a container. So this ensures that everyone who's running a service will be using exactly the same version, the same configs and dependencies. So no more mismatches. So everyone uses the same dependencies, same libraries, same configs to run your app. So talking about containers, containers are actually a unit of software that helps us to package our code and our dependencies in a very compact manner. So the main advantage of this is that it helps us to run our apps efficiently and reliably in various environments. So when we are packaging the code, like I mentioned, a Docker image is created which contains everything that our app requires to run. So when we build these images and we run them, they become containers. So the huge advantage of doing so is that our software runs in the same exact way no matter what OS you're using, and under the hood, be it Linux or Windows, it runs in the same way. So this uniformity that Docker containers help us provide is really crucial, especially when deploying apps for production. So in recent times, containerized apps have largely taken over the traditional method of running apps via VMs, which is virtual machines. VMs actually require a full copy of the underlying OS to run, and you can actually imagine how much space the overall duplication of the system libraries, tools, etc. would consume. So all of that is really solved by using Docker. So now let's get into the main goal of this video, which is to help you to kickstart a Next.js application, and then you can Dockerize that. And before we start, make sure you have Docker installed on your laptop or computer. So to install Docker, you can do a very quick Google search on Docker install Mac or Windows if you're using a Windows laptop, or Ubuntu if you're using Ubuntu, depending on your operating system. And let's go to that website here, and you just need to install Docker desktop. So you can choose the appropriate installer and get that installed. So the first step is to create a project. So for this, I'm going to use the create next app toolchain, which helps to bootstrap a Next.js application from scratch. So it comes out of the box with all the configs and stuff already. So let's do that. Let's go to a terminal and let's run yarn create next app. So now it's going to ask us a few things, like for example, what's the name of the project. So I'm just going to use all the defaults for this demo. So now it's already installing all the dependencies, so this can take a while. Okay, now that we are done, let's actually go into our folder, which is my app, and then I'm going to open this up in VS Code. So on the sidebar, we can see that our app application is already structured very nicely into different folders. So the main folder that you should be working on is the pages folder. So if you open that, you can see that there is an API folder within, and then you can see underscore app, index, and these are the main files inside the pages folder. So the start of the application is, of course, is going to be in underscore app. This is the main starting point for the application, and your index page is basically the root file, the root page that it serves. So, and here under the API subfolder, we can see hello.js. So basically this is an API route. Like I mentioned, API routes actually help you to extend your application to provide some kind of API handling. So you can see that there's a handler here, and which actually returns a JSON response of name is John Doe. So let's actually try this out. So let's go to a terminal and run yarn dev. So this would start our application on localhost 3000. So let's open that up. So here we have it. This is our home page and this is our index page. So it says get started by editing pages/index. So that's exactly what you're seeing here. So if we go back to our index page here, we can see that whatever that you're seeing there, it's all HTML that's been defined here. So if we have a div, we have a head. So head is offered by Next.js, which contains some of the headers for the page. And then there's the main section of this application where we define the various divs that you're seeing here. So this is just a sample, and so of course you can edit this. And to test out the API, we can just go to localhost/3000 API/hello, and you would see name is John Doe. So let me zoom this. Yeah, you can see that visiting localhost 3000/API/hello gives you John Doe. So now that we have a sample app that is working, so let's go to Dockerizing this application. So we have done step 1 using the create next step toolchain, which creates boilerplate code for us. So now as step 2, we are going to add a Dockerfile. So these are all the information that you need to provide in the Dockerfile. So let's go to our code and add a Dockerfile. So back to VS Code, and in the root of this folder, I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it Dockerfile. And now let's copy and paste what we have from there. So this is what I have. So from node 12, so here we are specifying version, so we can actually check the version that we have on your computer. So for example, you put node and -v, it will give you the version. So mine's 14.17.0. So I'm going to copy that and replace that here. And now what we're going to do is that, so we're going to create a new directory, which is /user/source/app. So here's where our app is going to live in. And we're going to set this as a working directory. So from here on, all the commands will be executed onto the working directory. The first thing that we need to do is to install our dependencies. So without these dependencies, our app will not be able to run. So we're going to copy the package JSON files that we have. So here, if you see, there is a package JSON file which actually lists all the dependencies that's required for our application to run. So I'm going to copy it to the working directory. And next, I'm going to copy the yarn.log file, which actually is a very detailed description of all the dependencies, because the dependencies might have sub-dependencies. So it's an auto-generated file, which is created when you install dependencies on your Next.js application. So we're going to copy that as well. So finally, we're going to run yarn install, which installs all these dependencies listed in these two files. And the next step is to copy the source files. So this is where our source code, which you have written probably in your pages folder, all these index files, the public folder, everything will be copied into the working directory. And now let's build our application, which is to use the run command yarn build. So we're going to expose the port, and that's where my application is running on. And finally, we need to run the application, and for that we are going to use cmd, which is command. Let's execute this command, which is yarn dev. So of course you can change this to yarn start as well. So yarn start runs in like production mode, yarn dev is in development mode. So we have created our Docker file. So let's see what's the third step. So here we're going to add a Docker Compose file. So think of Docker Compose as the main orchestrator, which helps us to manage these Docker containers. So essentially it's like a tool which helps you to define and run the containers that is required for your Docker applications. So it's really easy to set it up because all you need is a YAML file which specifies the config. So I've listed a sample Docker Compose file that you can use. So let's try and create this tab. So new file, docker-compose.yml, which is YAML. And now let's copy and paste what you saw there. So here basically I'm specifying my app, which is the name of the application that I have. The ports being exposed is from the container, I'm exposing 3000 to the outside world, which is 3000. So this specification helps to expose our port externally, right? So we are specifying a build context, and the Docker file to use will be here, which is Dockerfile. So specifying volumes helps us to persist data which is generated and used by these containers. It's kind of optional, so if you actually remove this and if you run it, it should work as well. So now that we have this, we are pretty much done, but there's one addition that we can do. We can add a docker ignore file. So it would be docker ignore. So the reason why we have this is very similar to .git ignore, right? Here's all the files that we do want to actually add to our Git repository. So similarly, we do want some of these folders, and very specifically, we don't need the node modules folder to be copied over or anything. So we can actually specify that we want to ignore this folder. So you can specify any files or folders that you would like Docker to ignore in the .dockerignore file. So step 4 is going to be running in a Docker container. So for that, it's really easy. Let's go back to our terminal. And I'm just going to say docker compose, right, up -d -- build. So let me explain this command, right? So with Docker Compose, what you can do is to spin up this instance of your app in a container, and it uses all the config that you have specified in your YAML file. So it follows whatever you have instructed in the Docker file. So this sequence of commands, it will run inside the container, and then it will also build your image for you with the -- build. And this flag, which is -d, actually specifies to run it in a detached mode, right? In the background, it can detach and run rather than on the terminal itself. So if you run this, you can see that it's performing all the commands that we have listed in the Docker file. So for example, run the make directory, which is the app directory we want to create. So we delete the working directory, we copying the package.json, and then now we are running yarn install, which is step 6 out of 8. And yarn install, it's actually running right now. And now we are copying our source files, and then we are running yarn build. So yarn build helps us to build our application for production use. So now it's exporting to image, which means it's creating a Docker image. And now it's running a container. And oops, it says its address is already in use, and that's because I forgot to stop our server that we are running. So I'm just going to stop that, and let me run this again. And this time will be faster because our image is already created, and that's it, we are done. It's just container has started. So next step is we are going to view our container, and for that we are going to use this command docker ps-a. So we can see that we have an application which is running. Let me expand this, and the name of that is my app, and we have exposed the port 3000 to 3000 and created 54 seconds ago. So our Docker container is running. right? So now let's take a look at the logs of our container. So to that, you can put docker logs -f, which means it will just wait and show you more logs if it's incoming. And then we specify the container ID, which is 1f6, and press enter. And here it shows you the logs. It says that the server started on 3000. So what we're going to do is that we're going to visit and see if our app really works. And there we go, our application is working. So now our app is running inside a Docker container, and we are able to access it here because we have exposed that port. So once again, we can see that here. Our port is exposed from the internal container, which is running on 3000 internally inside the container, and that port has been exposed outside. So that's why when we visit localhost 3000, we are able to access our application. And let's try accessing our API as well to see if that works. So I'm just going to put API/hello, and good, that works as well. So that's it. So we have Dockerized our Next.js application, and we have actually gone through all the commands here. So docker compose up -d dash build builds and runs your Docker container. ps-a shows you the list of containers running, and logs with the -f and your container ID shows you the logs of the container. So I hope you found this video really useful on how you can Dockerize your Next.js applications, and thank you.